Welcome to the Transform Sales Podcast, where forward-thinking business leaders come to share their experiences and ideas, learn from each other, and amplify their results together.
Hey guys, it's Amir Reiter of the Transform Sales Podcast. I got my guest, CEO and founder, Jakob from YourSales. What's going on, man? How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing good. Had a late flight from Miami, but I'm back in Miami, ready to rock and roll. Where are you based these days? What part of the world are you in?
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. I'm based just outside of Amsterdam. But it's Europe. And what we do here at YourSales is we help SaaS companies with their sales growth. So it doesn't matter where I am because it's
called a nation state. I think what we're really building is a nation state of expert B2B sales agency owners.
Yeah.
There's a book. I forgot who it's written by because I get to quote the book, The Nation State, but it's interesting because like you said before, it doesn't matter where we are anymore. It matters what we know collectively and what we can get done, what we could share. And it's an interesting time to be alive and be a professional these days.
That's why I figured I started YourSales 10 years ago, and
yeah.
When I started, immediately I thought that YourSales would have to be a global company. Not in the sense that we would have people all over the place, even if that sort of comes with the territory as well, but more in the sense that you should be able to offer your services to any company anywhere on the planet, because software as a service companies also by default are global companies. Even if they don't know it yet, and even if they maybe don't feel like it yet, they will be global companies.
So it's in their DNA.
Yeah.
It's like if you're like a dry cleaning store and you're down the block, like you're global, you're probably not global, right? You might not be able to get deliveries,
Hardly.
But you know, if yeah, and I agree with you, and I think that it's an awesome thing seeing. It's almost like it's globalization and like decentralization at the same time, right? Where people don't need to kind of be in the mega cities anymore, and they could be in their hometown bringing innovation. So it's just an interesting time to be alive, and also it's an interesting time where someone like you and me, I have a better opportunity of getting on a podcast and connecting and understanding the life of a leader like yourself in 2 seconds and become friends with someone like yourself versus, somebody who's in my own city. It could take forever to cross paths with somebody who's got that much experience. So it's just what a world we live in where we can do that, and people need to understand, I think, the same time that they have the ability to sell that way. Well, fast
absolutely.
and quick, right?
Do anything like that, right? Sell, buy, acquire knowledge, anything, right? It's super easy.
Yeah, no, I agree. For those listening, the idea of this podcast is just really to kind of share the honest truth about mistakes that buyers make when engaging sellers, either on the buying cycle or selling cycle. And mistakes, I'm not talking mistakes that hurt the buyer's bottom line, right? This is not about the seller's bottom line. Mistakes that hurt the buyer's bottom line, right? There's 2 kinds of mistakes. The mistakes will, man, we made a mistake in the sales process and we're going to lose it to the competition versus it's going to really cost your bottom line, and I want to protect you. And some buyers have they've hired outsourced sales before, and they've done the whole this tried it before and it didn't work. So trying it again.
They get burned, right? And now they want to try to avoid getting burned, and then they end up trying to burn the outsourced provider instead because they don't want to get burned.
That's exactly what we're trying to stop. Yes.
We want to do it, but we want to do it without risk. Yeah, we want to invest, but not really.
But we will tout our heads high that every $1 million of revenue is worth $10 million of valuation.
Yeah.
But
totally.
If we lose $35,000 to get that $10,000, that's a bad formula, right? We've seen this before.
Yeah, and look, it gets much worse, I think, because sometimes it's just about $5,000 that the investment that people are trying to over here in Europe, the VC rounds are considerably smaller than they are in the US, and so the money that's available for funding growth is also a lot smaller. It's smaller portions basically of cash, and so people are really trying to make sure, as they should, right? They're trying to make sure that the money lasts as long as it can. They get the biggest possible bang for the buck. But one of the problems with that is that they will try to negotiate you down, and B, after you have signed, try to get as much as possible, even outside of your initial agreement, into your delivery, and so those are problems. So
and that's what it's called. We refer to that as scope creep, right? And
yeah,
for those that are listening that might know the term scope creep, I'm gonna let Jakob.
no, but it's when when customers sort of start to append new tiny details to let's do this as well, right?
They
Just
buy
for
apples
context,
and they want mangoes.
yeah,
they buy
well,
apples
not
and they're measuring you on the mangoes.
They want the apples, but they still want the apples, but now they also want the mangoes, right? So absolutely. Just for context, so that everybody understands, what we do is at YourSales is we provide consulting, conversation generation, what most people probably would be calling lead generation, and we provide dedicated reps. And customers make different kinds of mistakes depending on the kind of service that they're buying. I think, for instance, for dedicated reps, one of the things that they often do is they try to want everything for cheap, and they forget that they're in the job marketplace, they're in the labor market, right? And so they're competing with whatever somebody can get somewhere else in a regular job. And they forget that when they're speaking with an outsourcing provider, they're speaking with somebody who is also competing with the labor market, right? And so and who is trying to make money off of the whatever is being paid to the sales reps, right?
Do you think it's
so it can't be
or
cheaper?
neglect?
So people try to get dedicated reps via outsourcing and have it be cheaper, yet they don't understand the sort of economics of it and how that lands them with lower quality talent than if they would just go out and hire themselves.
Do you think it's a symptom of bad buying habits, lack of just being able to think in first principles and understand that?
It's lack of having thought it through. Every single time I have this conversation with a customer and say, okay, so how do you imagine this looking? You're trying to get somebody to sell for you. You want them to work for you, and their options are this, right? And so you want them to work for less. So why would they do that, right?
Yeah.
So if you want people who are worth this, then you'll get people who are worth that, right? You won't get the people you want. You'll get people who are essentially lower quality talent. They can be good at other things, but not necessarily at what you need them to be good at. And then every single time I have that conversation, it lands. Then people say, "Oh yeah, I never thought of it. And I thought about it like that." Okay.
Well, to that point, right? Like if I interview you, right, a couple years from now, you sell your company, and I'm like, I want to bring Jakob on my team, and your compensation package is X, Y, Z. My compensation is X, Y, Z, but I'm so committed that you are the guy for my business. I might offer you an increased salary, right, or bonuses on that, right? Because that's the tendency. It's like sports, right? Like how do we compete with people, right? So why is it that not only does that not same hiring process when people are looking for talent not carry through to outsource agencies? In fact, it's the opposite. Instead of saying, hey, Jakob, your sales seems like such a good fit. You've sold to the same personas before. You charge what? I'm going to give you 20% more and take care of us. Make sure we get the best rep. Not only is it not that, which is how they buy higher normal talent normally, they do the opposite. They go lower. It's almost like a backwards wave sign where it's like
absolutely.
I think
what do you think causes that? I think it's that a good chunk of the companies that are looking for sales outsourcing have some sort of inherent belief that sales outsourcing is cheaper. Outsourcing to cheaper economies can be cheaper. And that's how you get gains in things like marketing or software development and so forth and so on and so forth. But if you want to outsource sales, then you need to have people who understand the language, who understand the culture, and who can operate in that space where you want to be active. And so you can't really get people, not at scale, that are not certainly not in consultative sales. Maybe you can do in transactional sales. In fact, I think for sure in transactional sales, but I do consultative sales. And so when we look for sales professionals to come and help a client do opportunity management, build all the relationships and all that good stuff, then they are in market. And so in market, you fight against the rest of that labor market at the level of that economy. Mm-hmm. And there's just no way to cheat that, right? You can't. The only way is to go. The only way to get cheaper is to buy something which is cheaper, right? And so that means downgrading your expectations of that talent, and
Yeah,
that's
oh,
not
I
what
think
you
that
need in sales.
I think the term outsourcing is very destructive in the sense that it just means so many different things, right?
Yeah.
Like if you look at even in America, like outsourcing really took a hold of like manufacturing jobs leaving to China, right?
Mm.
And that is completely different than hiring a sales expert to generate $10 million of pipeline for you, right? Those are things where it's like, hey, how can we lower the cost of an iPhone? Well, you can lower the cost of an iPhone by building a factory in a low cost, low tax zone with low cost labor doing the same repetitive things.
Yeah,
There's
but
no real
also in
ingenuity.
software,
Yeah.
as a service. You just outsource. Outsource offshore your development centers to somewhere where people get paid less. You can still pay them well relative to their economy, but that can be cheap to you because you're in a rich economy. Everybody wins. That's fine. But it's still the idea that it is cheaper to have software developers in, say, well, Ukraine is a little bit of a bad example right now, but say
No. Yeah. Yeah. Makes sense.
Poland, anywhere in Eastern Europe, and India, anywhere in Latin America, and so forth, right? So customer support centers, you chuck them off to India. That's cheaper. So, and people so often have the same kind of idea about how you can get sales shipped off to a cheaper part of the world. And certainly in consultative sales, that is not the way forward.
No, I think people need to also understand that they could take a look at their whole company holistically as they should as a machine with a plan, right? And it could be a combination of having a very high pay, very high skilled person getting paid very high hourly, and then people that are outsourced doing something that's already been like, hey, we get these Facebook leads, they take 3 emails, then a phone call. Like there are definitely situations where these things can work, right? And there could be a mix, right? Like a company can work with your company, your sales, to do consultative sales where it's experts that are opening opportunities to CEOs that are cold. It's very
Mm-hmm.
difficult. And at the same time, if they wanted to save capital money, they could directly hire global talent themselves or work with a nearshore. With the plan is to save capital, right? The plan is
Yeah.
we got it down so big that if we take this and we lower the cost without lowering the quality, we save money. That's not the same in sales. So they come in with this mentality and it's broken from the beginning because they're also at the same time saying, hey, I need to hit a million in revenue or 5 million in revenue. I know my valuation because I have a venture capital company that's going to take my stock back if I don't hit these goals. Do you really want to go cheap in a situation like that? Do you want to go cheap with product market fit? I'm like, this is what creates the value, right? I think for people
Yep.
forget that an MVP, minimal viable product, is less about the product you have, more about the more about your target market's willingness to buy it, right? And they're trying to go cheap on that, and I'm like, maybe for those listeners,
Won't
you could
work.
tell like
Yeah, no, it won't work.
what happens. What does that mean? Like, what does not working mean?
Yeah, well, what?
Like
So what that means is that you won't be able to tell the stories at the right kind of level of the organizations you're trying to sell to for them to believe enough in it to make a decision, to make a change. So you are not going to land the kinds of customers that you want, and you also don't get the right level of experience. So as soon as sales professionals who do not have sufficient experience get significant pushback, then they take that pushback as truth rather than having a conversation about the criticism that the potential customer is coming with, right? So where the experienced salesman will go, or saleswoman for that matter, will go, okay, I see where you're coming from, but how if we look about it how if we look at it in this particular way, or just say no. But the less experienced salesman is going to go back to his manager and say, yeah, but they say they already have it. Have what? They say they already have what? Well, they have, what is an example? You have technologies that remind customers of each other, but solve different kinds of problems, right?
yeah, like you're selling a
So
contract management software and they're thinking DocuSign or something, right? Like like it's
yeah, exactly.
yeah, and that piece of information that you find out is valuable, right? I think it's interesting that there tends to be almost no value when people hire an outsourced sales for market validation or these concepts that for other companies are billion-dollar industries, right? And they just want to kind of skip to revenue, and it creates this just it creates also a bad selling process, right? Because I think buyers, and you've probably seen this before, where if they're not really understanding the process, they also start getting the wrong customers, right? And if you get the wrong customers, you're going to have bad onboarding, bad experiences. So it's like it really
Yeah, it's
affects
not going
the
to.
whole
Yeah,
machine.
yeah.
Yeah,
Your listeners,
we've
are
seen
they also small companies, sort of startups in that space?
who
Your customers.
our customers are mostly software companies, anywhere from Series A, Series B. We're a marketplace, so we've seen it all.
Yeah,
Service companies, but typically the sweet spot that we see that are outsourcing in general are software companies with an average contract value of 10 to 35,000. Is that sweet spot with the concentration, where most companies are coming in? And it's a good question, because I think this is some of the data that we want to provide, right, to the community. I think by even understanding who is outsourcing, you
yeah,
can reverse engineer, is it good for you, right? And it's just, we live in a world where you can get so much transparency and information and make better decisions as buyers and sellers.
yeah.
Even as a seller, you have the power to also research a buyer and,
Absolutely.
are they funded, right?
You
Are
have
they
the
seed
duty.
rounds?
It's part of your
Yeah.
responsibility. Well, if you're not researching them, you're doing them a disservice, right? Because you
Yeah.
need to make sure that they're right to be brought on. But the reason I'm asking is that the reason I'm asking about whether the size of your customers is, I think we spoke earlier before the show about mistakes companies make when they
Yeah.
are buying outsourcing, and I think one of the mistakes that companies often and frequently will make is they outsource too early, right? They outsource before they know anything about their sales process, before they outsource before they have first customers, before they know anything about what it takes to sell their own offering. They are
Mhm.
outsourcing the go-to-market to a company that has yeah, that, and often try to do that on terms that are not very favorable
But
and not
let's
very.
unwrap that though, right? Because do you think that becomes a problem when they have the wrong goals, right? Like can and should a company outsource, building personas, finding market validation? Is it that they're trying to get a return on sales when they don't have it, and they just don't really know what they're buying? Because I believe that if you should outsource your market validation to a company like yours that probably is expert at it, right? So is it that they're outsourcing at the wrong time, or outsourcing with the wrong goal?
Then they're outsourcing with the wrong goal. It often goes hand in
Okay.
hand with them wanting to have like terms that are unfavorable, that are not providing an incentive to give them the learning that they need to grow as a company, right? So a typical example would be, I think I've had a couple of handfuls of those just over the past week, where somebody books a meeting and wants to have a conversation about sales outsourcing of their SaaS software. And then you look up their website, you see on sites like SEMrush that they don't really have any traffic, right? And so you conclude that, okay, so it's probably fairly early days for them. And then you go back to them and you ask, hey, so where are you guys in the process at the minute? How many customers do you have, and what is your goal of our conversation? And include, would are you thinking about going profit sharing, revenue sharing as a way of propelling this partnership forward? Yes. Okay. So that means that there is no incentive at all for the outsourcing provider to provide any kind of feedback on what's working and what's not. The only thing that counts is the next deal, because that's what you get paid for. And that's a mistake. When you're an early stage SaaS company, you want to learn as much as you can. So instead of doing, or not necessarily instead of doing outsourcing, but in addition to doing outsourcing of just the hands and feet, you need to outsource a level of know-how as well, to make sure that you have people on board who can tell you what the steps are you need to go through in order to grow. And that's what they typically they hire outsourced partners for just operational execution rather than operational excellence.
Yes, and I agree with you. And operational excellence does mean, what I'm listening, is also feedback, right? Like start and stop and
Totally.
constant
Yeah.
communication. And it's
Insight,
just for some reason
experience.
it's not sexy, right? We live in this world where it's like I personally not that's sexy, but how about I actually heard from a customer that all these crazy features we built, they're not really care about. They just care about stop. They care about is it going to get me off spreadsheets? And you're coming in there with all this terminology. It's like there's no value on it. But think about what is the well, let's call it the sales debt. This is something that Tito Bohr brought up as a term, sales debt, like the bad practice built up. Like, what's the sales debt built up where you're like you're taking the wrong message and you're scaling it now, right? Like you went fast, you
Yeah.
didn't focus on the problems. You found no value in the mistakes. You were just, I'm right. I know what my buyers want, right? And now
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
hire 30 sales reps that are saying the wrong thing. What is the
Yeah.
cost of all those people that have now heard your brand and are listening? Like this company built something for themselves, right?
No, but it's true. I
Like
mean, it's the same logic as you take as being careful with automation, right? You take something that you tried out a little bit. You maybe you may have gotten some early results, but you didn't really test it at statistical levels. And so now you're putting it to automation, and automation is taking you into a brick wall at 300 miles an hour. It's not,
that
you gotta research.
that brick wall is customers that might not never buy from you ever
Oh,
again
totally.
because
Because yeah,
uh,
yeah.
we live in a world of cancel culture.
But
We
not
don't
only,
hear.
it might not be just a, it's not necessarily just a customer that'll never buy from you. It could be an entire market that will not never buy from you. Imagine if you become enemies with with your addressable market in the US. Game
Time to find
over.
new business.
Yeah.
Time to find new business. And this happens over and over again. How many times have you seen this? You've been in the industry for what now? 11 years?
Yeah, I've been in software for 20, God, longer than I care to remember, actually. I think probably my very first sales job back in the mid 90s was a software sales job.
It's a good career to be in.
There was no SaaS back then, but it was all, video conferencing
On-prem.
software. So video, yeah, well, yeah, it was video conferencing on-prem through tiny little digital telephone lines, and with TVs that were deeper than they were wide. So yeah.
I bet you it was still cheaper, faster, and more efficient than the incumbent's technology. I'm like, you almost laugh at it now or where we're at, but
Of course.
what was before that, right?
Well, that was traveling with an airplane, which in the days where airplanes were super expensive, right? So that was the alternative.
Yeah. So tell me about your best buyer, right? And by best buyer, I mean they're happy and they stay with you for a long time. With people listening here, right? Like who do you help the most? And I'm gonna try to narrow you in, right? I think we're all about that 80-20 rule, and I know that you probably service a lot of people, a lot of places, but
yeah, I get it. You have an ideal client profile.
Software,
yeah, everybody
service.
can do. Yeah, no, I get it. Everybody can do business with everybody, but for every single company, you have a company that is your ideal client profile.
Well, I already know, like if I'm like Zoom Info or something, I could tell. Like if you were selling this technology probably before the people were creating it, right? So you've been in tech and software since the 90s.
Correct.
Services or softwares, you have to pick one. What is it?
So I'm sorry, what?
If you have to pick between service and software, and you could only pick one, what would you pick?
Software. What do you mean? Well, to sell?
A lot of agency owners are answering services, and this is great. We're separating.
No, look. Okay, the answer is a little more complex.
I knew you would say that.
I would want to sell. I would want to sell software at the core, sprinkled with a little bit of professional services, because it becomes when you have for instance, when you sell enterprise software, if the software that you sell, if you can successfully sell it and you can sort of sprinkle it with a little bit of professional services dust, then it becomes super sticky. It becomes really, really tricky to kick you back out again. And so,
but is this an answer? And I love it. I love the answer because I also fundamentally understand it, why you're answering that way. But do you think it's a symptom of also buyers? Meaning that if all buyers came and really understood the math of their funnels, they really understood. And are you friends with Jakob from Winning by Design? He's
of course,
he's the man.
Dutchman.
We love him. Yeah, I figure we love him. Tony, our CRO, just went through his courses the other day. I've known that guy for 5 years.
Yeah.
Um, do you think that your answer is a symptom of people not understanding math and funnels? And if software companies came and really understood that even if there's 12 months of no sales, but you got one in month 14, which you'd get, you would have a hollow ROI. If they were a little bit prepared, would you just say software? Is the service sprinkle coming in because you know it has a high LTV and a high measurability, and it kind of almost protects the buyer from bad behavior?
No, I think it's a good idea to protect the buyer from bad behavior, actually.
I think
No,
that's
I
what you're
think
doing.
no, but yeah, but no, but there's also that you're protecting your LTV, and if you're becoming so sticky because you're integrated to all sorts of systems on the customer side, then the without your CAC going up tremendously, it's going to be a win, right?
Do you think that you need to be sticky for them to get the ROI? Meaning that, is it, when we say we want our clients as agencies to be sticky, are we also saying it in a way of them getting what they want too? Like there's a difference between like sticky, you can't cancel, we got
Yeah.
you, like you're, versus like you need to be sticky to not hurt
No,
yourself. Like,
it's sticky in the sense that yes, it's going to be tough to get rid of us, not legally but just technologically, it's going to be a heavy lift, which is fine if we consistently continue to deliver value, right? If the value that we deliver goes up by the numbers of people and the numbers of years that we are on board, super fine. Then it's absolutely win-win, right? And that's fine. So, but if it's just we are tying people in, that's a little bit different.
I struggled with this as a when I was a sales service agency owner, where I didn't want to do contracts. I wanted to do month by month. I wanted to do quarterly, and what I found was that customers actually did not get anything they wanted, and hurt our company and brand. And then we noticed that 6 months, 12 months, companies were actually getting what they wanted. Now, at the same time, I have let people out of contracts, right? I had people that were 6 month contracts, and we literally told them, we said, like, you don't have product market fit, right? Like you're
Yeah.
like, this was a company. I remember this company was like an app company for car dealerships, where like they can build their own little digital website, the people, and the dealerships were like, hey, like we don't have, like it was during COVID, or like things are sold out right now, like we don't really have this need to generate more sales. And then we told that to the client,
Yeah.
and we let them out the contract. It's like, we don't need to, like nobody learns when they try to fit a square through a circle, right? But it's that, like, it's interesting because it's almost like how, like, this word contract is so negative that sometimes it's really hard to find the balance of what is good for you and your goals, right? Like, as a buyer, and it's like very tricky. And I don't think there's a clear answer for that, right? But it's almost like braces, or if you get braces, you can wear them 2 years of your life, and if you don't wear the retainers, you'll lose all those 2 years, right? And it's like, so,
But
like,
it's
how.
about being to have you have to have conversations with customers about what is good for them, what's their situation, how can you best help them. If you can't help them, then so be it, right? But as
Yeah,
long as
no,
you can make them an offer that is interesting for them, then they become customers. And as long as you can be interesting to work with, they'll remain customers. And at the minute that that you're not interesting, that you're not delivering value anymore, then they'll start to want to move,
Yeah, when you say
right?
I don't know, right? Like, when they say, "Hey, this is our goals," and we come up with great ideas, then we're a part of the team. And I don't know, it's time to go. But that goes for anybody on your team, right? Like internal, external, it doesn't matter, right? If people don't have value, get out,
Yeah.
right? Um,
Yeah,
I think people
unfortunately,
are.
that goes a lot. It's not unfortunate actually that contractors go out when they don't deliver value. It is a little unfortunate that how long employees can stay on board without delivering anything at all.
Oh my God, I've
So
seen AEs working for 15 years at companies with $1 million sales, oh my God, that would be another whole podcast to get into that.
absolutely, yeah, yeah, yeah,
That would be
yeah,
a whole other story.
yeah.
So software companies, companies that have product market fit, that are looking for, like, should a
Yeah,
company come to
okay, so
you?
to your question about what's
Yeah,
the ideal client profile, it's a company. The ideal, if I can dream up the perfect customer, then it's a customer with a level of funding that allows for international growth into parts of the world where they do not want to have local legal entities because then they want to work with an outsourcer, someone who can handle sort of
Like a U.S.
the
company
payrolling.
penetrating EMEA.
Yeah, absolutely, that would be great. And it would be even better if their sales ops is, I wouldn't say a mess, but if they have work to do on the sales ops side, because then we can sell them consulting and we can help them there in great many ways. We can help them with sales professionals who can do opportunity management and so forth. And in fact, we can also help them with that top end of the funnel where we just generate conversations. That would be awesome. So to be fair, I think probably one of the best customers that we've had on board here was the all-time best customer was a U.S. project management software company, which shall remain unnamed. But they were at the point in time that we started doing business with them, they were 60 people exclusively in the US, and they wanted to go international. They didn't know where. They didn't exactly know whether the timing was right, but they knew they wanted to take on Europe first, as is often the case with US-based companies. The next part of the world down from the US is continental Europe, or maybe the UK because of languages, but definitely continental Europe. And so we ended up going and covering continental Europe for them. Had some of their best reps for that first year within just 6 months off the top of my head. Then we moved on to LATAM and opened that, and to APAC and opened that. And they ended up being a customer for, what was it, 7-8 years, which was until they ended up being at the time that we parted ways. They were 1,300 man company with plenty of resources on their own, and having been acquired by a really large organization. So yeah, so that was.
Did NetSuite acquire them?
No.
Okay, so I'm trying to. Okay.
Yeah, this is
I think I could figure it out.
Yeah, but there's so many of these kinds of companies are plentiful. But
those kinds
my main point is that was ideal.
Those kinds of results are not, right?
No.
Helping. So that's the point we need to highlight.
No,
right?
it went very well. And then of course what happened was we would go out and we'd find the right kinds of people for them. Then they would operate, and this was probably what they did right, and what I think more companies should do, which is right, especially in sort of the consultative sales space. Instead, when you do outsourcing, try to do sort of outsourcing, insourcing, and not in-house, but because it's impossible, and it would have been impossible in their case. But you need to try to bring in the people who are selling. And I know that there may be legal challenges with that, but bring in the salespeople as much as possible into your day-to-day operations and make them feel like they are the team. Not that they're externals that are sort of accepted as part of the team. They are part of the team, right? Unconditionally. They are on a different kind of contract.
They are part of the team.
But in the day-to-day, they are an important part of the team. And so that's
where did we get so wrong that we consider money spent, $10,000 spent on a W-2, which is reference to the U.S. playbook, is different than $10,000 spent on agency? Like, where did we go so wrong that the revenue is different when it's really a number? I'm like, it's strange to me. Is it basic tribalism, just kind of like human nature?
It's human nature. You want it to get fixed, and you're paying someone to fix the problem. The problem is we need some more sales. You take some money, you throw it over the fence, you hope that they do some good with it. That's often how it's done. But there's more to it, right? There's also some legal issues with part of the reason that they're using either what is called W-2s or 1099s or whatever, is that you don't want to have those people on your books. Now, in some countries, if you have a 1099 contract, for instance, in some parts of the world, then you typically, when you're in sales, you just have one contract. Now, in certainly across countries in Europe, they will call that, they have all sorts of, what's it called? they have all sorts of localized words for it. But essentially, what it means, you're trying to pretend to be an entrepreneur, but you're not.
Freelancer.
You just have a single customer, and so you should be an employee.
Freelancer.
Yeah,
We call
no,
them
not
freelancers.
but you're
We have
trying
them on our
to
marketplace.
appear to be a freelancer. You're trying to appear to be a freelancer, but you're not. You're an employee with a freelance contract. And in most countries across Europe, a freelancer gets all sorts of tax deductions. So plus the challenges with legal issues and that require freelancers to build up a pension or take care of healthcare and and disability and those kinds of things, right? So
But
those
that's
are
also
reasons that you don't want.
it's also saying people are not responsible at the same time, because we are helping people become freelancers and business owners, and
Yeah,
and we found that it's in different regions it's actually different, right? Like in Latin
yeah,
America, the employment contract, I believe, is a jail sentence, and I'll tell you why. By law, you can only have one job, meaning that if you work at night and weekends, you're breaking a law and you can get sued. So like now you just can't actually hustle. They have
yeah, but
22 Mondays off.
that's in many countries. It's in many
22 Mondays off, right? And then while other people are working, they're off on vacation, and then 40% payroll tax, which goes right to the government and doesn't get reinvested in them. So, you know, the consequence that you mentioned of them paying their own stuff, don't you also feel like that also could be the responsibility they need to improve their lives by actually understanding that they are business, that they understand where it's coming from? Like, are there situations where
My
that
point
could
is
be?
that the states that they are living in, the countries that they're living in, don't give them the room they need to be responsible. Because
They don't even let them.
if
Yeah, they
you
don't
only
educate
have
it. Yeah,
because if you only
yeah,
have if you're working full time as a freelancer for a single company, then that's your single customer at that time. And
yeah.
the country that you're operating in will not let you do it. It is against tax law.
Interesting.
And that's a shame because it shouldn't be, right? Because you're a consultant who sells know-how and you move from company to company. It's how it works. And that's how
Yeah.
it should, or at least that's how it should work. And the laws that exist in this space, they exist mostly to protect completely different industries, right? They exist to protect people who work in fruit plantations and construction companies and whatnot from being taken advantage of. But in sales and sort of our level of
We want, yeah,
work,
it's entrepreneurship.
it's completely different. But
Yeah, it's a different
countries
animal.
legislation doesn't see any difference, right?
Yes.
So if I want to go out, for instance, and take on a German contractor just for a single client, I can't do it because the German tax authorities will not allow it. Not done.
The German
And
tax
it's a
authorities
shame.
are very tough. I've heard my friend says that if you
Yeah,
have
but
like a nice
but
car,
the
your neighbor will
law
call
is
you.
this. The law is the same here. There are differences between countries with regards to how it gets enforced or not, but the law is the same across most of Europe. Like it or not.
You know a lot about tax law. I know the high level. I know that one size doesn't fit all. I know that some of these, even our first and last name, these are built for paper worlds, not digital worlds, right?
Yeah.
So like things will change. I think innovation always kind of faster, cheaper, more efficient always kind of wins in the end. And it's interesting that you mentioned these things because I read a book called Nation State, which just talks about like future countries in the cloud where you can literally pool together more money, buy more land, have more people, and it's like, well, what's the answer? Maybe it's nation state. Maybe now somebody in Germany says, I don't want to do these rules, and I'm going to just be part of a nation in the cloud and move to Marbella, Spain, and
are they mentioning Estonia in that book?
Yes,
because they do it. Yeah, that you can become a digital citizen of Estonia. So
yeah. So because I'm listening, because like for me, I've seen the difference between employees of different countries and freelancers, and it's night and day. One is a time culture that they just want to sue each other. I've literally known, and the other one is like, you're a man, pay your taxes, and now you can earn more money. And I could see the benefit. I think education needs to come out to educate people that like, hey, the idea here is get more jobs. You are a business, pay your taxes. But yeah, it's network state. It's written by You probably read this book. Why can't I say? I forgot his name, but he's a brilliant guy. He had a podcast on Lex Friedman that was 7 hours long, and I watched
What's
I
it
watched
called?
the whole thing. It's called The Network State. It's by Balajis, Balajis, and it's
I'll
so
look it up
funny because I'm looking at
afterwards.
his book. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
I got it
great.
here.
But it's like kind of things we're talking about where it's like, hey, if these laws can't change because they're just so bureaucratic, well, how do you get above it? But ironically, it's going to be the salespeople that are going to be pushing this first, right,
Look,
and leading the
I
way.
think anyway, for in most things, when change is coming, who is going to make sure that change happens, right? Who is going to make sure that other people take on change, if not salespeople? People who are able to sell an idea, and they may call themselves something completely different. They may call themselves politicians or whatever, right?
Rebels.
But at the end of the day, they are people who are able to sell an idea so other people make changes.
I agree.
And I think that, for instance, if we ever get to get our act together and do something about climate change, then it is because somebody eventually, finally managed to sell us all the idea that we need to act as a globe and just do something about it. But until someone can sell that idea to a global audience, you can forget about it.
I agree. They got people like Leonardo DiCaprio trying, not hard enough apparently, using their fame to.
Yeah.
Not smart enough, hard enough. I don't know. I support him.
Yeah. Not
He made
visibly enough.
he made a movie. He made a video that was like he showed hypocrisy with the astronaut recently. So it's called Don't Look Up. Don't Look Up. This has been great for all the listeners that are checking in. If you're a U.S. based company and you want to take over Europe without any of the liabilities and compliances of hiring all people in different states, and that you are looking for someone who has actually been part of multiple software companies, builds and exits, have to contact YourSales. How can they find you?
Absolutely. Find me on LinkedIn. I hope maybe there's going to be a link here somewhere. So find me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect and also to get acquainted. I think it's probably what makes the difference. Happy to spend the time here. This was great.
Are you going to be attending Outbound 2023, our conference, bringing all the buyers and sellers?
Is it virtual?
It's hybrid.
All right.
Columbia and virtual. Okay. We're going to get you to speak about your expertise.
Now I will.
I'm gonna challenge you in on exactly what we talked about, because frankly, there's a lot of companies that are looking to penetrate Europe, and they have a hard time finding you, right? They can't cut through the noise, and that's what this is designed for. So thank you again for chatting, and everybody who's listening. Appreciate you joining the Transform Sales podcast. You can find me and on all social, Amir Reiter and CloudTask.com. Jakob, have a good one. Take care.
Take care, man.